I convene the August 9th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting to order at 4:31 p.m. Chris, please call the roll.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Here.
Debbie Bryant.
Here.
Emily Swistek.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Tatiana Weinstein.
Here.
Will Satter.
Here.
Agenda 2 is the opportunity for visitors to speak. Public comment is for the general public to address the board. Each person will have up to 5 minutes to provide public comment. Given that nobody is present, I will go on to agenda item number 3, is to approve the minutes of the April 25th, 2022 Finance Committee meeting. May I have a motion and a second?
I move to approve minutes of the April 25th, 2022 Finance Committee meeting.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Chris, could we have a roll call, please?
Marjorie Bartelli.
Aye.
Debbie Bryant.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Emily Swistek.
Aye.
The motion passes. Item 4 is to review the draft budget and appropriation ordinance 23-04, and Director Weinstein will please provide the summary.
Sure. Okay, so I just want to review first what is the BNA ordinance for everybody. So the budget and appropriation ordinance, or the BNA, is the ordinance that all Illinois taxing bodies must adopt in order to spend the funding the library receives. So we present a tentative BNA in August next month for the board to take a look at, but we won't adopt it until September. So the Finance Committee today is doing the kind of the first run, and if we want to make some adjustments, we can. After today's meeting, we will send the draft BNA to our attorney, and he'll take a look at it, and by September, we should have his full confidence as well as the board's confidence. You can see in the packet within the ordinance, there is a budget column and there's also an appropriation column. So if we turn in the packet, starting on page 6, it's the easiest to start with here. So the budget column is, as it's stated, it's the board approved budget from earlier this year. And then in the appropriation column, that designates our allowance to expend funds for any necessary obligations that extend beyond the budgeted categories. So just to restate, the appropriation column is not our intention to spend. It's allowing us, should we require any spending beyond what we budgeted. So one example of that would be, we always use this example of if we have a huge snowstorm, we budgeted a certain amount for it, but we can't control Mother Nature and we need more funds to do snow removal. So that's what the appropriation column is for. On page 8 of the packet, I'm just summarizing right now and then we'll go through each line quickly. But on page 8 of the packet, the total appropriation ordinance shows a very reasonable 4.5% allowance from the budget to the appropriation. So we're just increasing the appropriation 4.5%. Last year, it was 6.5%. So it's a really tight budget, but we think the administration is pretty confident with 4.5%. I will say that some organizations, they just do like a flat increase of 10% across the board or 20%. Our attorney said some libraries just double what they budgeted for, so they allow that allowance. But every year, what we've done just practically is gone through each budget line and made some determinations, looking at our budget, asking our vendors for their estimates. So we've done it more comprehensively than just like a flat amount. And just a review of our funds, we have 4 major funds. We have the corporate, special, IMRF, and FICA. Corporate is our operating budget, so that could either be called corporate, operating, or general fund. That's the same thing. The special is a fund for capital projects like our renovation. Our IMRF is our retirement fund, and then FICA is the Federal Insurance Contributions Act that pays for Social Security and Medicare. And then all the funds are also within the BNA document here. In the B&A document, there's also a transfer of funds into special reserve. We budgeted $60,000 and that's reflected here, and we'll go over that once we get there. So there's a doubling of that in this B&A, but this is for the committee to make that determination, or the board at the end. Ultimately, the board will make that determination. So one question that always gets asked is, how do we come up with this amount that's appropriated? So we use the end of year, June 30th numbers. At the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th, we have kind of a finalization of like how much we've spent through the year. So we use that end of fiscal year number. It's an unaudited number. So once we have our audit, some funds can get moved into the next fiscal year, some funds stay. But again, this is all estimates. So we also utilize LIRA, that's our risk agency, our insurance risk agency for estimates. And we also utilize SICH, which is our financial outsourced financial advisor for estimates on like things like interest earned and things like that. So everything I've just explained, I was thinking of outlining in like a document like this for the board packet. So I just want to pass it out just so you can see what this would be, like a cover page. This would be like a cover page to the draft, but it just outlines what I just discussed so people can be introduced to it. And now we can walk through the B&A line by line. I won't go exactly line by line, but like category by category, just to give some outlines of how we came up with the appropriation amounts. So under employee costs on page 6, you can see we have that budgeted amount, and we've also kept the salaries flat in the appropriation. And the reason it's flat is because I don't anticipate making any significant changes in terms of the number of our staffing. We will probably have some, every year is different. Some people leave, some people stay, there might be a retirement. And I don't anticipate any significant like numbers changes in terms of numbers of staff, but there might be some internal like change of job description or things like that. But we're comfortable leaving that flat. We did receive some advice regarding health insurance under employees' costs to increase it by 10% in the budget, which was reflected in the budget. But we're also, it was also suggested to increase it another 10% just in case for the appropriation. Yes. Actually, in here it's about 9%, but that's just to see, just in case something happens, because our health insurance quotes come in on a calendar year versus a fiscal year. So we really don't know what 6 months will be until we receive that estimate. So that's why we've increased that there. Under building costs, actually most of these lines just show a modest increase to account for some maybe unintended increases or expenses. Where you will see a bit more of an increase is under maintenance contracts and cleaning and pests. That's about 3/4 of the way down. We increased that because if you remember, we had a 6-month contract with our cleaning service because there were some things we were unsatisfied with. So Will negotiated a 6-month contract. And so we're still assessing that to make sure that we're comfortable with this cleaning service, but the other people who came in on bidding were a little higher. So if we're not satisfied with our current company, we may choose to go to another company. So we're allowing for a little bit more there. And then under non-contractual repairs, there's a little bit more under this line because we've talked about this a couple of years about upgrading our HVAC software system, which is not inexpensive. So we haven't done that yet. So we're allowing for that here. We're still investigating how much that would be for us. We have not received a definitive quote. So we're allowing for a little bit more there. But outside of that, everything else is just increased slightly. If you flip the page to page 7, is it 7? Yes. Under operating costs, we're staying pretty close to the budgeted amounts here. We are allowing for some modest increases for printing and postage. Postage has increased just recently, and then paper products are still showing higher amounts for us in terms of purchasing. Under insurance costs, again, we're staying pretty close to the budgeted amounts. And under insurance specifically, these were suggested amounts per our risk agency. And under contractual, the two higher totals here are under outsourced services and payroll. Payroll is pretty easy because Jackie just received notice that they are increasing their costs recently. Under outsourced IT services, we are anticipating using the IT services a little bit more. Last year, we spent the amount of the budget, but I from communicating with our IT manager and admin in general, we're looking at using our outsourced services a little bit more. So that's why we have allowed for that. Under, where am I now? Personnel development, we are keeping, again, close to the budgeted amounts here. We are allowing for some opportunities that may arise mid-year, like there might be a conference that pops up that we find that would benefit the staff. And there may also be a class that comes through Rails or another source where a staff member may want to take a class to increase their skill sets. So we allow for that there. Under equipment, again, close to the budgeted amounts. However, under technology, you never know. So we are allowing for just a bit more under that technology line. And then if you flip to materials, flipping, I don't have my stapled. These categories under materials, we pretty much know where we're at. There's usually not unanticipated costs here. So we're staying very close to the budgeted amount, unless there's like some big book that comes, like the next Harry Potter or something that we really need to buy a ton of copies of. But we're really close to the budgeted amount there. Same with programs. We have a pretty good idea about expenditures. However, we did increase $3,000 under community relations in case something comes about where we really want to promote something. And then again, that's, how we promote it. Do we increase printing? Do we increase purchasing like logo identified materials to promote something? That would go under there. Under other expenses, so gifts, this is always a guessing game. So you never know who's going to gift you something. So we budget $5,000. That's kind of our traditional number there. And then as far as appropriation go, we put in 20 as a placeholder. You just don't know. Now, what I'll say about the B&A is, let's say we put 20 there. This could be any number. We could put $100,000 there, hoping that someone gives us $100,000. But if we put $20,000 there and then someone comes in and says, I want to gift the library $80,000, we haven't allowed for that. They can still write that check and we can still deposit it. We just can't spend 80. We can spend 20. So that's what that means. The other piece is if someone gives us $80,000 and we want to spend $80,000 in this fiscal year, we can always amend the B&A. We can do that at any time. So should we be that fortunate, we could always have a special meeting, amend the B&A to allow us to spend the 80. So this $20,000 can be any number. It's just up to the board or the committee to decide what that number is. Under per capita grant, we know what that number is, so it stays flat. And then under supplemental IMRF, we are fully funded and we don't need to add anything to our IMRF funding. So that's why we didn't budget for it and we're not allowing for the appropriation there. We've done very well there in terms of funding. Under debt certificate. Here we budgeted $66,000. We rounded it up to 70. There were some questions at the prior board meeting about paying off the debt early. So Will connected with PMA and they are recommending we do not pay off the debt early. And the reason being is because we received a very low interest rate and you know what they are now. So they're saying that because we have a lower interest rate, stay with our payment plan and use the monies that we have as we do to invest. And we would have a better return using what we have investing in to invest to receive better gains that way instead of paying off our debt early. So that was good to hear. And after debt certificate, where am I? I'm losing myself. Contingency is flat. We've always kept it flat. We rarely dip into that, but we have that there. So you can see the subtotal corporate. And then under subtotal corporate is the transfer to special reserve. And this is a question mark for you and or the board. So we have budgeted $60,000 to transfer to special reserve. And we would do that at the end of the fiscal year. Now, we just doubled that amount because, I mean, again, this is up for discussion. We don't have a plan on anything new in capital projects because we're rounding out the renovation. We still have invoices to pay. But at the end of every fiscal year, the board chooses to move money into special reserve, and it happens by ordinance. But we'll have to eventually create a new special reserve ordinance to lay out what we are planning. Again, that might go through the physical plan committee, depending on what we do with the vacant lots. It could be anything, any capital project. So because in the next 10 months, we have to think about it in this fiscal year. In the next 10 months, what do we plan to expend, if anything? Like, do we plan to expend $60,000? Would we hire a consultant to look at something in the next year or so? I'm not sure that would amount to $120,000, but we're allowing for it in case. So that's something to think about. After I finish this, we can go back and talk about those numbers. Okay, so then you see the total corporate. Then IMRF and FICA, we are keeping with the budgeted amounts because that is what our agencies have told us to keep with. There's nothing more that we need to allow for there. And then under special reserve fund, here we've kept things very similar to the budget with small increases in facility and consulting. Under project expense, we don't anticipating spending this $1 million. And actually today, we did find out what we have left is under 500,000. But again, this is not our intention to spend $1 million. We just allowed for it in the budget. So we're just keeping that $1 million flat for the appropriation. The only other thing that's kind of unique here is that we didn't budget for security systems, but I allowed for 10,000 because if the board wants to do something with one of the lots, whether we sell it, that's a different story, or if we do something ourselves with it, we might want to allow for some kind of security, something like a camera or something like that, if we start to develop something on these lots. Again, up for discussion. So that's that. If you go to the next page, section 2, this kind of summarizes where we are. Now, I just want to remind people, these are estimates. Estimated is used a lot here. The first A is more of the solid number, and that is the cash at hand at the beginning of this fiscal year. And I think Will's got a document that this is where this number comes from, because that's where all our questions, like, how did you get this $6 million number? So Sickage provides us this number at the end of the fiscal year. And that comes from the treasurer's report. So that $6 million is from there. B is the estimated total revenue from all sources. And what does that mean? All sources means we use the working budget that we approved. It includes the levy, because we've asked taxpayers for the levy. It includes the interest earned from all of the funds, and then any other income we've received. So like a gift, donations, things like that. Letter C is the estimated expenditures. So again, we use the working budget, which was included in the packet. So the the expenditures for the fiscal year, this 5709, that's straight from the working budget. Again, estimated. We never expend 100% of our working budget. There's always that allowance there. So this is an estimated number. And then D is the estimated cash expected to be on hand at the end of the fiscal year. So how do we come up with D? D is A plus B minus C. And that's how we come up with that number. E is the estimated amount of taxes to be received by the library district. And this number, this 4.3, that comes straight from the county. So that's their number. And then F is the estimated amount of income to receive from sources other than library taxes. So basically, again, this restates interest, estimated amount of interest, estimated amount of gifts, and other sources, donations, things like that. And then section 3 is simple. That is the total of the appropriation, which is on the other page, that total number 59. And again, this is just a 4.5% increase from our budget, which I think it's a nice number. It's tight. It's not going over the top. Which again, even if we did do like a 10% increase across the top, it doesn't mean we would expend that amount. But some people in the public may, balk at something that large. But, we never spend the appropriation. You can't. It's our legal limit. Fun.
We won. Yes.
So that is the summary. If we want to walk through any or have any questions, I'm very comfortable with this. I feel good about it. But there are some questions. Do we want to keep the numbers the way they are? Do you want to increase, decrease? It's up to the committee. And then this would go to the full board next week in the board packet for adoption of the tentative. And then there's 30-day waiting period. And then in September, there's the hearing, which is 15 minutes before the meeting. And then we have the adoption in September. So 3 stages of public viewing.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I know that the Illinois minimum wage has been increasing, and I don't know if that increase is completely done happening.
2025.
2025. Okay. So I'm sure that you accounted for that.
Did. Yep.
So we were able to keep salaries flat while accounting for that?
Yes. So what we budget for is we always allow for, in the working budget, we allow for, we pretend everyone gets their raise. Not everybody gets the full raise. So we account for that. We account for increases due to the increase in minimum wage. So every year since this was enacted, we've increased the lowest level category up incrementally. I'm happy we did that because a lot of organizations are kind of caught on their heels now where they would either have to cut staff because they have to allow for the $15 an hour for the minimum wage or, or they just have to fight it and just have a huge budget increase for that 1 year. So we've done it incrementally, yes.
So the BNA is equal to the budget on this sheet. So I guess that's saying that you have a high level of confidence that the budget is going to cover the increases you just talked about.
I do, and also we've had some retirements of higher paid staff and replaced them with staff who are not paid as high. So, we always review that every year. So we're in a good position.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tatiana, building costs, we talked about non-contractual repairs and mentioning upgrading the HVAC
Mm-hmm.
system. I guess from my knowledge, when we upgraded the air handlers for a very large amount a couple of years ago. Why is that in building costs? Explain to me why it's different than a capital project. I mean, when it's that kind of money.
It wouldn't be that kind of money. The air handlers were in the hundreds of thousands.
Right.
This is software upgrade.
Just software.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
Okay.
I don't want to quote myself on this, but I would say between 25,000 and 30,000,
Okay.
not hundreds of thousands. Does
Yes.
that ring
Yeah.
true? Okay. I might be wrong.
And then also, under D, insurance costs, I hate to bring this up, but what would entail a workman's comp claim? We don't do anything physical as far as, I guess you could fall off a ladder or if the staff is, so that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
But that would go through our pool, our insurance pool. So it's
Okay.
all of our costs for that go through the pool, and then they calculate it out for all of the libraries.
Okay, would it be appropriate to ask, have we had any?
We haven't.
Okay,
Yeah.
just
We
curious.
haven't, but again, it's part of the pool. So if some people in the pool, if some libraries have huge costs, then it trickles down to the pool.
Okay.
We personally have not.
Okay,
And this number was a recommended number for us through our
Yeah.
agency.
and also when you mention under A, contractual cost, I'm sorry, outsourcing, accounting, HR, and IT. You said we'll utilize more of the IT. Would that be, is that included for the new website design?
It does.
Oh, okay.
It is part
Just-
of that
okay.
line of costs. Using the outsourcing is I'm starting to better evaluate our needs here regarding IT. We're going to have a lot more IT needs in these 2 rooms. We're going to have some more uses in the ceiling,
Mhm.
and we may need the assistance of the outsourced firm for those things. So I just want to evaluate it and allow for it if we need it.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since our strategic plan has expired and we're gonna be working on a new one, like where would that come out of? Like things that we're working on with that? Like would we plan on doing strategic planning ourselves or would we have
That was the plan.
consultants like we did last time? Okay.
Yeah, that was the plan, is to do it ourselves to save funds. But
Okay.
we have a consulting line if we wanted to use.
Okay. And that's out of the
Consulting.
special reserve?
We could.
Okay.
We could. But in my director evaluation, I suggested doing it ourselves. We did do it ourselves the last time. We didn't use a consultant. We did community engagement with a consultant.
Oh,
That's, I'm
yeah.
confusing that too, right?
Yeah.
Definitely mixing it all together.
But if we wanted to hire a consultant, it could come out of the consulting line in special reserve.
and then
We would have to outline it in our ordinance though.
if that's what we were using it for, we'd have to outline. Oh, in the special reserve ordinance?
Yeah, we would have to say, we want to do another community engagement, and we would utilize consulting out of that.
Okay. And then what I had asked you about the other day, doing like a attorney training for the board as a whole, that would come out of
That's
personnel development out of
Yes.
F?
Yep. Yes. We haven't done that for a while, so we should
No,
probably.
it was Liz, Marjorie, and I was when we were first
Mhm.
onboarded onto the board. We did that, and it hasn't happened since. Do you remember that,
Yes.
Liz? Do you remember? I know Marjorie, you because I mentioned to you before.
Yeah.
When we first got on the board 6 years ago. So we have 4 people that haven't had that, and I'm sure we all could use a refresher too. So I just think that that's something that would be beneficial to do. So I was just curious where that would come from.
Personal development, and I don't think I have to remind everybody about COVID. So we did a lot of like digital or webinar type stuff, and I think the board had, the sexual harassment. That's a statute, but
Mhm.
having someone come in and do a program, I think would be nice. Yeah.
I have a couple questions
Sure.
too. So the health insurance, this is just my curiosity. Are you guys in like one of those municipal government health insurance plans? Okay, I was just curious about
Yeah.
that. And then for the Polaris, does this take into account maybe the possibility of doing that is it
Vega.
LEAP? Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Good, okay. Let's see, I think, and then as far as the maintenance, I went at the last meeting, I can't remember what it was, but Liz had brought up a good point about the something with the pesky weeds or trees or something will kind of
buckthorn.
invasive buckthorn. So did
buckthorn.
we kind of account maybe a little bit for that with the landscaping? I knew there was gonna be some
So
possibilities.
everything I found is that a little contrary to what you said, Liz, is that the honeysuckle and buckthorn are not considered noxious, and those are the ones that you can be legally culpable for keeping on your property. With regards to like financial damages, with the honeysuckle and the buckthorn, it's strongly encouraged. They are invasive. Like to get rid of them if you can. but we would not be legally culpable in any manner if they were found on the property. If we were cultivating them, yes, absolutely. We can't bring them in, we can't plant them. If we made a program of trying to grow them on our property, then we'd be in trouble. But they're not classified as the noxious ones, and those are the ones that if you do not remove, if they are found and you do not remove them, then you are in trouble.
Did they name any of the
sense?
noxious ones? I'm curious.
They did. There was honestly, I can't remember. So if you have information to otherwise, I'd love to see it. But it's worth keeping in mind, but I don't think there's nothing actionable we have to do at this time.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was, when I saw pests on here, I'm like, okay, I wanted to make sure that we have money if we get some horrible thing happening here.
Well, that would be under,
We can get rid of it. So it's kind of
landscape.
landscape, so we have accounted for that.
Yeah.
So I think that was all of my questions. I was just curious that did we drop Verizon? Is that why there's when I was looking there, all of a sudden we had no money in Verizon for, this year? Was that a cell phone plan that we just dropped?
No, we have a lot with Verizon, but
Okay.
we've combined it into our phone line.
Okay.
So
okay, so that
instead of
just-
having Verizon having its own line
Oh, I
item,
see. Okay,
we
yeah.
combined it because we use them so much into just phone. Because
Gotcha.
all of our stuff is Verizon now.
And that was it. So thank you.
Do you mind me asking a question just to follow up? This has nothing to do with DNA,
Okay.
but it has to do with just how our phone works here. Do we have landlines?
It's all voice over IP.
Okay, just curious.
Does everybody feel comfortable with sending this to the full board as a draft with the cover page? Do we want to change, I had brought up the $120,000. Do we want to change that to another number? The 120, and as far as transfers to special reserve. And again, to remind everybody, so we budgeted 60 at the end of the fiscal year. So next June, we budgeted 60, but do we want to allow for more than 60? It's up to you. And again, it doesn't mean we will do it. It just means we're
It's just that we
allowing for it.
could. So like
We could.
if next June we say, hey, we actually have this extra money, let's put more than 60 in special reserves,
Exactly.
we can.
Yes.
I don't see a problem with having it there just in case. It's not saying we're doing it, it's just saying that we could.
And as you all know, projects take time. So who knows if we would expend $120,000, we might expend 50 or 5. You know, it's really, if we do a project, we would probably start it this coming fiscal year. If the physical plant committee comes up with an idea, and we would probably have to hire somebody, whoever that is. Maybe we needed a project manager on it, maybe something or another. We would expend funds out of that line towards that end. But is 120 okay? I can't imagine spending more than 120. But again, we can always revise this. Like, it would cause another meeting. We could revise it if we were like, oh man, we have everything. Someone donated money and we want to do this and we want to have a consultant. So that's why we doubled it.
But again, special reserve, we can only use it for specific projects.
Capital projects that we would outline in a new ordinance that we need to develop. But again, that has to be developed
Okay.
in conjunction with like physical plant committee meeting ideas, talk
Right,
about what we want to
Okay.
do, what we want to pursue.
I don't see the harm in keeping it at that amount because I don't have a rationale for changing it. I mean, that's how I feel.
I'm good with it. I just wanted to ask that question.
Okay, great.
I like having the cover letter. I think that that's
Mhm.
definitely helpful
Very
for
helpful.
the board as a whole, but also for the community. They're looking at the
Okay,
packet to see that.
great.
I like it too. Okay. So do we need, as this committee, it doesn't seem like we need to vote for this to go to the board.
No, you could just direct me to put it in the packet as a draft. And
Okay.
then I will do this same explanation at the board meeting for the rest of the board.
Okay, and I think you gained consensus from us for that direction, correct?
Yes.
So I have a question. So then page 5, that's just a draft of what would go with the B&A
Yeah, that has
once
to.
we approve it in September. So this was just for us to see.
This will be in the packet as part of the draft. It's just the tentative B&A in
Okay.
August, and this would be part of it.
Because this is just part of the B&A, right?
Yes, it's
Okay.
just it's the other cover sheet.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
yes.
But we will state that this committee has recommended acceptance.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Oh, that will be Chairwoman Sullivan's
exactly.
line.
I get to say something, so don't take it away from me.
When you report out about your committee.
Okay, so the last item, if we're ready for this, is to adjourn. May I have a motion to adjourn
I move to adjourn.
and a second,
I
please?
second.
Discussion? And if not, Chris, could you call the roll, please?
You can do all in favor. Say aye if you want to.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
So we are
Okay.
adjourned at
We are adjourned at 5:08.